Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So, in today's video, I want to discuss another interview with popular Brazilian singer Vanessa da Mata. Now, I had already featured a video focusing on Vanessa and her racial identity. I don't know, it's probably between 4 to 6, 7 months ago. It was some time ago where she stirred up the pot with what she was saying about how she sees herself in terms of race. And I had always wondered. Vanessa da Mata has been out maybe a couple of decades, as far as I can remember. I don't remember exactly when she came out, but I think it was between somewhere between 2000, 2010. I don't know, maybe 2004 or so. So she's been in the public eye for a couple of decades. But I never knew how she saw herself, right? I know when I looked at her, I could say, well, yeah, she has very light skin, but I saw a light skinned black woman. That's how I saw her. But I didn't, when you're dealing with Brazil, you just never know how people are going to see themselves, right? Have to always remember that how Brazilians are educated in terms of race, at least, a couple decades ago, maybe even now, the idea was to avoid any connection with being black. Particularly if you're light skinned like Vanessa da Mata is, you pretty much you can get away with that. It's only been, I'm going to say, in the last few decades that you've had black Brazilians of all types of phenotypes acknowledging, like, look, I'm black. They might say they're negro. They might say they're preto, both of those terms meaning black. They might say that they're pardo, which means some people call it, some people translate it as brown. Other people say it's a mixture, mixed race. But more likely nowadays, even a lot of people who look like Vanessa da Mata are coming to see themselves as black. But this is the second time where the Vanessa da Mata has made headlines, just discussing her own racial identity. So this is why I wanted to talk about this again today, because if Vanessa da Mata sees herself as black, and there's other people who watch her interview in Brazil, and they'd be like, "Oh, dang, maybe I am black." And I want to definitely acknowledge that in Brazil, a person can be deceived into believing they're not black, regardless of the phenotype. You'll see very brown skinned people in Brazil who look you straight in the eye and say, I'm not black. Um, and as I've always said, identity is something that's very personal. It's not for me to say, oh, people think that I'm going to I don't have the ability to be able to force somebody to see how they see themselves. You see yourself how you see yourself, right? But I am seeing this rising connection with blackness, particularly in the social media era. Okay. So today's video, I want to talk a little bit about this. Vanessa da Mata, she says, I was taught to say I wasn't black, says singer Vanessa da Mata, discussing her development of racial identity. So I want to explore that a little bit more, because the more she talks, the more I get to understand how she sees herself and why she sees herself in that way. Before I do get into it, definitely like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, and click on the notification bell. With that said, let's get into the video for today. So this is Vanessa da Mata. She appeared on one of I think it's the TV Cultura TV channel in Brazil. And as I said, this is not I can't directly call this a follow-up, but in some ways it is, because I've already featured a video where Vanessa da Mata spoke affirmatively about how she sees herself as a black woman. In that previous video, she says, look, I'm black. Don't take away the one thing I know about myself. The other thing I want to bring to light, this refers to a video that I did a couple of weeks ago. I don't know, a month ago, 2 months, I'm not sure. But a recent study came out that estimated that about 60% of pardos in Brazil, pardos who we say brown or mixed race people, don't even identify as black. Now, on the flip side of that, if 60% don't identify as black, we'll say that the other 40% does identify as black, which is about what I kind of estimated some time ago. So then if you have, I don't know, it's in the neighborhood of 90 to 100 million pardos in Brazil. If you say that 40% of them identify as black, that's about 40 million people, plus about maybe 22, 23, 24 million people who affirm themselves as strictly black. And so that's around what my estimate is. I've said for some time now that I don't accept the low ball number that says Brazil has 22 million black people, but at the same time, I can't say that Brazil has 100 million black people either. One says this is purely people who identify as pretos, meaning strictly black. The other number represents a mixture with the term pardo. There's upward of 95 to 100, 105 million people who identify as pardo. So if you take about 40% of that, about 100 million, and you mix it with the 22 million, we're looking at about 62 to 65 million, which is really in line with what I estimated for a while. I'd said Brazil was probably between 60 and 75 million black people. So that's a number that I would think is pretty reasonable when you're talking about a country with about 215, 220 million people. I think 60 to 75 million is probably somewhere close to the number. But again, it always depends. What one person may see as black, another person may not. So we'll never know for sure an exact number in terms of black people in Brazil. Number three, the third point that I want to that's going to come out during while I'm discussing this video, how Brazilian society encouraged people of African descent to deny their blackness. And you're going to get this from Vanessa da Mata. This is what she's talking about in the interview that she recently did. And a lot of black Brazilians go through this. People in their family, people in families, people in their social circle telling them like, no, you're not black. You're beautiful. Why would you call yourself black? Never call yourself black. You're some people will say somebody is white, say you're no, you're a moreninha. It's kind of like a more acceptable term for somebody who has brown skin, whether it be light brown or darker brown or, whatever. Never identify yourself as negra or preta because it's almost considered an insult, even though the black population has done well in changing that definition around as something that they hold as a source of pride. But let's get into what Vanessa da Mata talked about, because she's talking about her experience and her identity. So right now, what I want to do is I want to just do a quick overdub on what she said on this program. This is Vanessa da Mata, again, very popular singer in Brazil.
Pequena,
since I was little, I had a clash because I have a family. My father is very white with light-colored eyes. His whole family. And my mother's family is black and Indian, a little bit white, but not much. So I was the person. My grandmother would come and say, my grandmother was a healer, married to a dark-skinned black man. And she would say, I don't know, blah, 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 because so-and-so was black. And she was like, I would say, grandmother, are we black? And she would say, but how? How are we black? At a time when nobody talked about it. But I was taught to say that we weren't, right? That thing of, no, you're not. Imagine that. No. You? Where are you black? My dear, I am. Look at my features. Look at my hair. I am. Look at my butt. I'm completely black. The skin color comes from my father, but even the singing was from my mother, and that was a clash. Seriously. I even took a while because you're taught not to be. It's very good to see the new generations as they affirm themselves. It's great, it's pride, but we still have the situation of wanting to disguise it, not wanting to see yourself. So you heard what Vanessa da Mata had to say, this whole thing of people in the family trying to convince you like, no, you're not black. Imagine that. How could you be black? You're not black. Like, define yourself as anything but black, but don't ever say that you're black. I mean, I've read hundreds, if not literally thousands, probably tens of thousands. I've read these comments over the years on the various social networking platforms, whether it was the old defunct Orchid, then Facebook, then Instagram. You find these comments all over the place. So I'm sure there's a lot of people who can identify with what Vanessa da Mata was saying. In your family, particularly if you come from a family where you have a mixture of black, white, Indian, or whatever else could be there in your family, people are going to, like, no, don't ever call yourself black. Why would you do that? You're too pretty to be considered black. Okay. So a lot of people can identify what Vanessa da Mata had to say. And that's why I wanted to highlight this. There's a whole discussion going on online right now between the one side that says blacks and browns together represent Brazil's black population. The other side that says pardos are completely separate from black. I'm somewhere in the middle, as the report said. And this is a video. Okay, these are some of the videos that I've done recently. This is a video I did Oh wow, this was a year ago that I did this with Vanessa da Mata. It says I'm black. Don't take this away from me. This is the one thing I know about myself. Singer Vanessa da Mata stirs up debate on racial identity. So that's, like I said, this is kind of a follow up, but not a direct follow up. And then another study came out. This was about a month ago. The new study shows that 60% of Pardus, meaning mixed race brown people, don't identify themselves as black, which on the other side says that 40% of Pardus do identify themselves as black. Okay. So that's why I wanted to point this out, because there's this ongoing debate about this. And I'll just say, for the record, again, I don't think we'll ever know exactly how many black people there are in Brazil, even though we can have some estimates. I would say somewhere between 60 and 75 million would be probably a decent estimate. So again, this was coming on, this is taken from the TV Cultura TV channel in Brazil. And they did a story about this. After completing a 20-year career, singer-songwriter, author Vanessa da Mata begins 2025 on the stages of Sao Paulo. She is the protagonist of the musical Clara Nunes Atao Guerreira, which will be on stage starting from January 10th, a few days ago. The multi-talented artist was on the TV Cultura interview program Roda Vida on Monday, January 6th. So she's portraying legendary singer Clara Nunes. I've always said Clara Nunes, of all the female singers in Brazil, she's probably my favorite. She died in 1983. When I first got into Brazilian music, she was just, I loved her songs. She had a mixture of MPB, samba. You had a little bit of forró with Clara Nunes. I had all of her albums on vinyl. When I first started going to Brazil, I would always come home with a stack of albums. And some years later, they came up with this box set of Clara Nunes's whole anthology, her discography, I'll say, had all of her vinyl discs in CD. And I bought it. I'll never forget. I bought that collection in Belo Horizonte. And Clara Nunes, if I'm not mistaken, she was from Minas Gerais, which is, Belo Horizonte is the capital city of Minas Gerais. So Clara Nunes was also very fair skinned. So I think Vanessa da Mata portraying her in a musical is a perfect fit. Both women, some people say they're black, some people say that they're not. But so she's playing in a musical where she's playing Clara Nunes. So in the program, the editor-in-chief of Bravo magazine, Laís Franklin, cites a Datafolha survey, which shows that 60% of Pardus, meaning mixed or brown people in Brazil, don't consider themselves to be black, and asked the singer about how her identity was constructed. So that's the study that I was just talking about. And she went on this. I'm not going to read this again because I just read this in the interview. She just talked about having a very white father and then a mother that was black and Indian, with a little bit of, European in the DNA as well, but very little. So she talked about this. So I'm not going to repeat everything I just went through the interview already, but she also said about the lack of acceptance within the movement. The dark-skinned black persons suffer immeasurably more. The suffering is unbelievable, but we go through a lot of suffering too. So what she's saying is, and nobody's denying this, that, the darker you are to the African phenotype, the tighter the curl of your hair texture, you probably suffer more discrimination than people who are closer to, I don't know, somewhere in the middle or lighter skin in the case of Vanessa da Mata. But she's saying, as being the person that what she looks like, where she's clearly not white, she's saying that we, the phenotype that she has, people who look like her suffer as well. It may not be on the same level as persons with dark skin. But so, quote unquote, Pardus and mixed race people get a certain rejection from society as well. Even though arguably the vast majority of the Brazilian population is mixed already, it's just that some fall more towards the white Europe phenotype, others fall in the black phenotype, some fall in the Indian phenotype. It just depends. Most of the population is mixed, but they all fall and generally have a certain phenotype where somebody's going to put them in a certain group. Now, again, to me, like I've said this before, this does not solve the problem by Brazilians saying we're all mixed, because you're all mixed, yes, but who looks more black, who looks more white, who looks more Indian? And in a racial hierarchy that still sets the European phenotype on the top of the ladder, which people are going to suffer more discrimination? That's always the question. So the panel of interviewers in this interview included Ademir Correia, the content director of the Rolling Stone Brazil edition, Laís Franklin, the editor-in-chief of Bravo magazine, along with 3 others. So this is why I wanted to bring this topic out today, because this is something that I talk about all the time. As always, I like to put everything in a little bit of context. Go over to blackbraziltoday.com, about 4,000 articles over there. You'll see plenty of articles over there where people are talking about their moment of coming to understand and discover themselves as Black. This guy wrote a letter called An Open Letter to Neymar, the famous soccer player, about becoming Black. This was from back in 2020. Neymar had suffered what he thought was an event of, racial discrimination on the soccer field over in Europe. And it was like Neymar has always been the person that people pointed to, like he's such an essence of the problem in Brazil, people who look like him and refuse to define themselves as Black. So this guy here wrote an article. He was like, I was like Neymar once upon a time. We have to talk about this. This is an open letter to Neymar. Like, what's he saying? I always thought I was white, brother. I'll tell you a secret that I never said publicly. It's the first time that I've talked about this. A relative of mine used to rub, leite de rosas all over my body in order to lighten me up. She said it would help me. She also rubbed hot candle wax on my nose to make it thinner. I was young, brother. I didn't understand anything, but she did this. I forget. Let me look and see what he's talking about with this leite. It's a cosmetic product that Brazilians have used for decades. It is promoted as a good cosmetic product to stop pimples because it helps to clean and tone the skin, removing the excess oiliness. Let me see. Many people say that the product can lighten the skin, and a quick Google search with the words leite de rosas and clarear a pele, lighten the skin, you'll find several articles discussing this topic. So he says the great Neuza Souza Santos, she wrote a famous book in like 1983 that was called Tornar-se Negro, meaning becoming Black. By that, brother, she meant that we are not born Black, but we become Black. It's a process, That's why I understood you when you, much younger, said in an interview that you had never suffered racism, because reality, you're not Black. So he's talking about there's a lot of Brazilians who go through the same thing as Neymar. From what I saw, Neymar has slowly drifted over into seeing himself as a Black man. But when he first came out, he was, nah, I'm not Black. So this was an open letter to Neymar and many other people around the country and Brazil who are similar to Neymar in the fact that they don't see themselves as Black, even when there's evidence that they clearly are. This is from 2014. Identity in Brazil. Our children do not know that they are Black. Let's see here. Unfortunately, what still perpetuates itself in Brazil is embranquecimento, or whitening, of many who are born. Newborn children are recorded on their birth certificates as branca or white, being that their parents are Black. The origin of those babies is not seen, but what is put forward is a facilitator that generalizes people with this culture of not knowing their origins. Even parents at the time of registration don't impose for their children being registered as white. It's a source of pride. I talked about this in a video some months ago, maybe last year, well, sometime last year, where people, even having brown or Black parents, will have white on their birth certificate. Let me see, what else do we have here? If you ask in some public school classroom which children consider themselves Black, the answer is already known. Not even half of the class raises their hands, but more than half are Black. So this idea, children in Brazil not knowing that they are Black, as I've said, things are different now than when I first started going to Brazil, because I experienced this. I went to some schools in Bahia, and I would see all of these brown-skinned kids in the class. Some of them were more on the mixed side. Some of them were brown. Some were clearly Black or whatever. And I would ask the question. You'd be like 30, 35 kids in a classroom. And, I'll see clearly 60, 65% being Black in my eyes. And only about 5 or 6 of the kids would raise their hand. That's something that I saw. So I know exactly what this article is talking about. What else do we have here? The struggle for racial identity in a society that denies it is racist. Let me see here. The question of racial identity. Brazilians are a mixed people. We grow up hearing this exhaustively, and it is really true. We are mixed. However, despite all this mixing, in most cases, you can identify who is Black and who is not. So much so that there is discrimination. That is, we grew up hearing that we are equal, but the world tells us we are different in a very negative way. This is the point that I'm making. Yeah, it's not to deny that the Brazilian population as a whole is mixed. But of those mixed people, some fall more to the Black side, some to the whiter side. Some people fall to the more indigenous look. So saying that we all mixed does not solve the problem, because those closer to the non-white phenotypes are going to be the ones who are going to be subject to discrimination, which is the whole point here. Let me see what else I have. Mixed brown girls, mulattas, beige, exotic. No, they are black. Women tell how they discovered being black and the difference it makes in practice. So this is another report of numerous women in Brazil on when the moment came when they came to see themselves as black. Imagine, have a girl look like this. So I'm saying it's not just the lighter skinned people, even the browner skinned people will have this moment where they have to come and they have to reconstruct their identity because all that time, for part of their lives, they would deny that they were black. This woman says, my black identity began to emerge in 2004 when I began to see other black women, such as the popular singer rapper Negra Lee. At home, my family didn't make an issue out of this empowerment, but they always taught me and talked about racism. Before that, I didn't like my hair, and I'm not ashamed to say I didn't like ser negra. I didn't like being black. I had many problems during childhood and adolescence because I only identified with white women. I only had white friends, and I only liked meninos blancos, meaning white boys. But I was always the school joke. So when I saw that a black woman was beautiful in her naturalness, I wanted to be that way too. I stopped putting chemicals in my hair, but I had a relapse in 2007. Beginning to have relationships, sleeping and waking up with a person, seeing my cabello crespo made me cabello crespo, meaning kinky curly hair, made me stumble on this path towards capillary freedom. So all of these women here are just talking about the times and the experiences they went through in their coming to accept themselves as being black women. Something that's very common in Brazil. You could say it's been a revolution in the last few decades, to tell you the truth. A book by author Bianca Santana, When I Discovered I Was Black. Okay. This was a huge deal. Let me see, I forget what year. This is from 2013. Wow, this book's been out for over like 10, 11 years. And this is just a story about Bianca Santana. And that's her book, Quando Eu Me Descobri Negra, when she discovered herself as a black woman. Right. Some really intriguing stories there. So that's the reason why I wanted to talk about Vanessa da Mata here, because this is a story that you hear from a lot of black women and black men in Brazil who come to see themselves as black. Like I said, to me, from what I've seen in Brazil, it's a little bit different than in the United States. When I was a kid growing up in the United States, I remember being 6, 7, 8 years old and thinking my own mother was white because my mother might be maybe a shade or two darker than Vanessa da Mata, very fair-skinned woman. But different from Brazil that would push you like, no, you're not black. Why would you say you're black? Either you're white, you're mixed or something, but anything but black. From the time I was about 7 or 8, my mother let me know immediately, like, yeah, I have fair skin, but I'm still a black woman. She knew. In the United States, it didn't give you the opportunity to be able to say that you were not black. This revolution in racial identity is something that's been rising in Brazil, particularly in the last 20 years. So that's why I wanted to share Vanessa da Mata's latest interview on her racial identity. Curious to know what you all thought about this interview. Definitely like this video, share this video, drop a comment in the comment section. I always love what people have to say, whether you agree with what I have to say, whether you disagree, whatever. I love the debate. Sometimes we have to just agree to disagree. That's fine too. I never delete anybody's comments. Definitely come in here, drop a comment, get a conversation going. Consider subscribing to this channel if you've seen more than a few videos that you like, and click on the notification bell. That way you'll know when I put up new videos. With that said, I'm going to end this video here and request that you all come back and check out the next video that I post here at Black Brazil Today.